Good morning. Demographics and a fantasy economy. That's what I want to talk about today. It's a fantasy that I've had for probably about a year now. I want to talk about how it originated and kind of spin it out as a story, a yarn, if you will. Hi, my name is Steve, and welcome to Awake with Steve, where I talk about my anxieties, the things that keep me awake at night, that wake me up in the middle of the night. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. It's a continuation from the previous episode where I actually went through demographic problems that I see developing and not seeing a solution to any of them. There's no technical solution. I'm not sure there's a human solution either. But I was going through some YouTube videos and ran across one of the videos by Tony Shiba. And he talks about the cost of photovoltaics. And you go, what's that got to do with the fantasy economy? It's actually got a lot. And this is kind of how I first came up with this idea. Okay. He was talking about the cost of solar cells, photovoltaic cells, and how in the 70s and 80s they would cost it cost $3 or $4 per kilowatt hour to deliver electricity from them, and how at the time that he made his video, it was down to 3 or 4 cents kilowatt hour that was being delivered, and not worldwide, but in some parts of the world, probably where labor is a lot cheaper than here in the U.S. So, and then recently, just like in the last couple of weeks, I saw another headline that solar cells, the cost of solar cells had dropped by almost 50% again, which takes them down to what, 1 to 2 cents a kilowatt hour? Which raises the question, at what point does the cost of generating electricity essentially become zero? Okay. Now, we mix into that artificial intelligence and the robots that we're currently mixing into that with AI, with artificial intelligence. And we have a capability to manufacture anything via robots, via AI. So that's kind of got me thinking about this fantasy. And it is a fantasy. There are a couple of big problems with it, which I will talk about a little bit at the end of this video, or towards the end. So here's the story. Cost of electricity, cost to generate electricity is essentially zero. Okay. AI and the robots, they suck lots of electricity, but it's free stuff. So now we take the AI and robot combinations, and they can rebuild the electric grid throughout the world to handle all of the electrical requirements that are going to be needed to turn the whole economy of the world into an electric economy. And think about that. Everything's electric. It's all built, maintained, managed by AI and robots, all driven by electricity. I can see some of you are already going, screaming in horror at that. But let's continue a little bit here. So at some point in that scenario, it reaches a point where everything that human beings consume is made without any human being involved anywhere in the supply chain. Okay, so it's the metals mined from the earth by robots. It's melted together by robots. It's formed into whatever forms it needs to be by robots, and delivered to people who then use those metal objects or anything, food, agriculture. Although it could be by then we have food replicators, just like in Star Trek. So essentially, the cost of any of that, of anything that humans consume, is zero. Okay. The only energy needed to create it is generated by electricity, and the cost of generating electricity is essentially zero. Okay. There's no human involved anywhere that has to get paid. So essentially, money becomes an exercise in ideals or an exercise in history, maybe. So at this point, it should be possible for people to not be worried about how expensive it is to live, how expensive it is to raise a family, to have kids, to have a nice car, a nice house to live in. So there goes away one of the big, often heard excuses for not that researchers give for people not having children. It's too expensive. That goes away. You're living in the city. It's too crowded. You got, too many people around. The house you're living in, the condo you're living in is too small. Now that you don't have to worry about a job, you don't have to worry about a car, you don't have to worry about anything really, as far as what would hold you to a location. Okay, you can live anywhere in the world that you want. Okay, so now overcrowding, unless you really want it, disappears as an excuse to not have children. And the world is a horrible place, disappears as an excuse to not have children. So basically, this fantasy takes away all of the excuses we have for not having children. And in fact, for people that want children, they can have as many as they want to take care of. I've known people, I know there are people in the neighborhood that I live in that love kids. They've had more than 3 or 4 of their own, and then they foster a bunch of kids also. There's always a past full of kids around them, around their house. So there are people that love the idea of having kids. They get caught up in their careers and having to pay for what their current life is like. They get caught up in this, that, or the other thing and forget about the things that they want to do. And that's one of the interesting things I think out of this economy is it frees up people to do what they want to do. Whatever it is, be creative, go explore the universe, do research. It's an amazing number of things that people can now do that they talk about doing, or it'd be nice if. It's completely different than any economic system that has ever existed. Okay, it's not communism, not socialism, it's not capitalism. And going into the future that we're looking at, where things are completely different than anything we've ever faced as a species, we're going to end up trying some things that are different. We're going to have to. We can't do the same old and expect different results. So the problems, huge freaking problems. The first one is people can do whatever they want to do. People are going to be people. And is there a way that we can manage these populations, that they manage themselves essentially, so that it becomes very, very much a live and let live situation? I spent a lot of time thinking about universal basic income for a while. I thought, God, that would be neat. We can do this. We can adjust this. We can actually make it work. It's basically a maintenance level of income. And then I got to thinking, people living like that, there are going to be people taking advantage of other people. And there are going to be people who are just, for one reason or another, aren't alert enough, aren't smart enough to know that they're being taken advantage of. So their monthly stipend that they can live off of will get taken away from them. And how do we take care of those people in that case? And how do we discourage people from taking advantage of one another and get it back to I want to say a truly Christian, if you will, concept of you take care of your neighbor, you love your neighbors, you take care of them, you take care of people, you feed the hungry, clothe the naked, home the house, give houses to the homeless, give shelter to the homeless. That would be interesting, except I don't have a whole lot of faith in humanity being able to manage themselves well enough to do that. And then there's another big if, which I think might actually put a maximum size on our population. So yeah, we could do that, but if we continue to grow as a population, we'll still bump into this wall at some point, into the ceiling. And that is, there was an experiment done, scientists back in the 50s and 60s, into the 70s, I guess. John Calhoun, I think is his name. There'll be links to an article regarding it and a YouTube regarding the experiments that he did with mice. He put together a colony for mice. It was much larger than what was needed by the mice he put into that colony. They got all the food they needed, the water they needed, they had space, they had bedding, they had everything that they needed. And they maintained, the experimenters maintained that level of materials as the population grew. At some point, the population just quit growing at a couple thousand. I think they had something like, the site was designed for 6,000 to 9,000 mice or something like that. You'd have to read the article and see what it says. And the population stopped somewhere around 3,000 or 4,000 at a smaller number. Again, read the article to see what their real numbers are. The mice just quit breeding. They quit having kids. They became, in some ways, self-destructive, in some ways complacent, despondent, depressed. And this was apparently run several times in different manners. And same thing happened. You know, there's a maximum population for mice, or maximum population density for mice, and they just kind of fall apart as a colony once they reach that population. So it's a big jump from mice to people. There are some reasons why you can rationalize it, but it's a big jump to imply that there might be such a ceiling for human beings. And what I'm looking at when I talk about that is, look at our most crowded cities now. Okay. We're not having enough children in those big cities to replace the population of the city. Tokyo, big, huge. They've been dealing with the population problem, as in depopulation problem, for the last 20 or 30 years. They've known it was coming. They've been preparing for it. They've been trying to encourage people to have more children. And actually the opposite has been happening. I've been seeing reports in various magazines and news articles that young people in Tokyo are just having less sex. They're less interested in having sex. They have their games, they have this, they have that. They're less interested in even dating, oftentimes. Sound familiar? Sound like surveys in the US where something like 60% of the young men between 18 and 30 haven't had sex in a year. So there may be an upper limit on the population that we have, and we will decline as a species from that upper limit, and that will not be pretty. So we're going to have to figure out, if we don't want to go that way, we're going to have to figure out some way of managing ourselves in a way that is somewhat humane, I guess. I don't know, something like that. So with that, I'll call it good. I'll call it quits this time. We'll see you again tomorrow. Oh, yeah, there will be links in the description of several things that I mentioned here in this video. So until then, see you. Bye.